You know, a lot of people want to acquire assets, whether it's real estate or other assets, but they don't really know how to get the money to do it. So we're going to talk about in this video how to use debt to acquire assets. So here we go. Okay, we're going to talk about different asset classes, how to use debt to acquire them. We'll talk a lot about real estate because that's my expertise. And then we'll talk about some other things, how to use debt to acquire assets. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, understand that debt is other people's money, okay? OPM. And eventually the other people, the OP, are going to want their M back, right? So when you borrow money, be sure you have an exit plan of how you're going to pay it back. Don't put yourself in trouble by using a lot of debt to get into something that you can't pay back. That being said, I'm going to give you a couple examples here of how I use debt to acquire assets. One of the ways to use debt to acquire assets is to go ahead and submit for a loan and try to get the maximum amount of leverage to acquire a property. So I'm buying a property right now for about a little under $7.5 million. That property, I'm going to need about $6 million to close. So it's about $1.5 million down. Now, if this is too big a number for you, just get rid of a zero. Buy something for $600,000, put 120 down, okay? My goal is to show you how to use debt. So in this case, I got $6 million in debt. I put about $1.5 million down to close. Now, why did I use the particular debt I used? Because it allowed me to put 20% down. On a big apartment building, usually I would need 25, 30, or 35% down. But I wanted to get more assets. So instead of using a lot of cash down, I wanted to get what's called more leverage. And I wanted to put less equity or down payment into the property. When all was said and done, and this transaction, which I'm closing actually this week, that's what I'm talking about it, is that I was able to get a little more expensive loan, right? But I got control of the asset. The asset has rents that are about 20 to 30% below market. It's in really good condition. It was an off-market asset. So by getting this asset under my belt, I used debt to acquire it by getting a little more expensive debt, so I needed less cash, and that's how I acquired it. If I went to the conventional route, I may have to put 30% down, which on $7.5 million would be $2.250 million. So in this case, I only had to come up with $1.5 million, leaving me $750,000 roughly that I didn't have to come up with. Okay, well, guess what? Now I'm buying another 36 units with that $7.5 million, doing the same thing. So instead of buying one building, I'm buying two buildings by getting higher leverage. Here's the pros and cons of that. The con is that you're putting less money down, you're going to have a little bit more payment, okay? But the pro is you get the asset. And I've said on other videos, get the money and get the asset. Because if you don't have the asset, you don't acquire the asset, you're not getting anywhere, right? So in this case, these rents are really low. So that extra $750,000, I'm using to buy 36 units elsewhere, and I'm using that for the down payment using the same strategy. That deal is about $3.2 million. Okay, normally I would need close to $1 million down. I'm going to get in for around $700,000. Okay, now there's more to this story because I'm going to get credits for the deposits and credits for the rents that are the rents are going to be prorated. So I may not even have to come in with $1.5 million. It may be close to $1.4 million, you see? But if I didn't get a higher leverage debt, I would have had to come up with more cash than I really wanted to come up with or had available in order to acquire these assets. So whether you're buying a house for $100,000, an apartment building for $500,000, leverage is one of the best ways to acquire assets and use the least amount of your cash. On another deal I did a similar thing where I got a 20% down loan, and then I got a private investor to come in, not for an equity piece, but as a second and pay them interest only on the deal. There was no restriction on junior financing on the loan, meaning you can have seconds. Some loans, they don't allow a second loan. This one did, okay? So acquiring assets and using debt really comes down to going after the right loan for the right situation. Usually in my experience, I like to use private money loans because they get higher loan to value. I pay a little more, I get the asset, I can remodel the asset like this home I remodeled here, or I can get an apartment building like I'm talking about, manage it properly for a couple of years, and then refinance it and take that cash and equity out and put it back in my pocket. And in some cases, be into the property no money and have cash flow in perpetuity, which is the ideal situation. But again, when you use debt, remember, you got to pay it back. So when I go to get this debt, how am I paying the debt back on this house? I'm planning on selling it, right? And it's on the market now. How am I going to pay the debt on the $6 million I borrowed? I'm going to raise the rents within what's allowed under California law, which right now is 5% per year plus whatever the cost of living is for the area. So I'll be able to raise rents over a couple of years. And as I raise rents, what happens with apartment buildings? The value goes up. As you raise rents, the value goes up. So as the value goes up, I can then get a new value and I can refinance the property. Does that make sense? So no matter what your particular use of the money is for, in this case I use real estate examples, understand that leverage and the ability to acquire assets, the more leverage you can get, the better. Now another way to use debt is to have seller carried financing. And I've done that where I've had sellers almost give me 100% of the money by doing cross collateralization, where they'll take a note on another property that I already own that has equity, and they'll give me all the cash to buy the one I'm buying because I have the down payment and equity in another property. So I don't have to have the cash. I simply have to have the equity. So in this case, I'll have one loan on two properties. The equity from the one property is the down payment per se, and they'll give me 100% of the money to acquire the asset. Again, same thing. Once you acquire the asset, you want to increase the revenue, you want to repair it, you want to fix it up, you want to do whatever you need to do to eventually refinance the property and put lower interest or market rate debt on it, or sell the asset, pay off the loan, and get your money back. Both of those are important. Now, how do you use debt to acquire other assets? You know, I do mostly real estate, so in my world, assets really come down to, real estate for me. But you can use debt to acquire stocks, for example, and there's people that teach this, where you can leverage the stock you own and get on margin additional stocks. You got to be careful because if the market moves a lot, you may get what's called a margin call where they ask you to pay off the debt. So use that sparingly. Another way is to use a line of credit on your house, where you can go ahead and take a line of credit off your house and use that in order to acquire some assets that you may want to get, whether it's gold, stocks, cryptocurrency, or whatever. Just remember, you're going to have to pay that back, okay? But I like personally real estate because it brings cash flow and it has the ability to decrease your risk because you can sell the house and it doesn't fluctuate typically as much as stocks, gold, crypto, or some of the other things. At the end of the day, when you borrow money, just remember that you got to pay it back. And remember that whatever you're buying with the money that you're using to acquire assets, be sure to get the value of those assets secured and figure out what it is. Don't be afraid to use an appraisal, or a cheaper version is to get broker's price opinion and pay $400 or $500 and find out what the asset's worth if it's real estate. Use professionals to help you before you borrow money to acquire assets, and make sure you know what you're doing. One of my friends, he bought this property through a private owner. The thing ended up falling down the hill. I mean, true story, okay, in Oakland, California. So it just messed him up. And had he got inspections and looked at the asset before he borrowed the money to buy it, he would have not been in much trouble because there was a lot of problems with the property. And I didn't see it till after it was already too late. He never asked me. So that's another important thing. Ask questions from people that know. And don't be afraid to pay them, okay? It's all good. So join me on the next video, and don't forget to subscribe, like, comment if you like this video. Join me on the next video where we're going to talk about how to get home equity and how to get your home equity and use that for your benefit to grow wealth or for other needs. I'll see you in the next video. I'm Paul Maguire. Join me.